Hello, everyone. I'm Florida Today engagement editor John A. Torres, and welcome to our continuing coverage of the 2022 elections. We're proud to present these forums in an effort to inform you, our readers, our viewers, the public, before you cast your vote at the August 23rd primary. Today, we will be talking with Misty Belford, incumbent school board member representing District 1. Misty's opponent was invited as well, but is a no-show. So this is kind of just going to be an informal one-on-one conversation between myself and Misty. So welcome, Misty, and we appreciate you being here.
Yeah.
Before we get started, just tell our viewers, our readers, the voters, some of your qualifications, people who are maybe new to the area, some of your qualifications and why you're seeking re-election.
Sure. So I was elected initially in 2014, re-elected in 2018, and hopefully re-elected in 2022. So I've served on the school board for 8 years. I have been the chair. Out of those 8 years, 4 times I have been selected by my bipartisan peers to serve as chair, 3 of those years being the last 3 consecutive years. I am a certified board member with the Florida School Board Association. I serve on or did serve until just last month, on the Florida School Board Association Advocacy Committee, Legislative Subcommittee, and Federal Relations Subcommittee. I also am a board member with the Brevard Homeless Coalition and the Florida School Labor Relations Association. So in the time that I have been on the board, I have served in many capacities, both, in typical board role, and then also outside of board role. I do a lot of volunteering to support our students. From substituting, covering classes, transporting items from our supply zone to our schools on the north end that can't get down there to get them. And so it's been a phenomenal 8 years. And despite the challenges, and I'm hoping to be able to be there for at least another 4.
Great, thank you. I don't know why 2022 is so hard to say, but I have a hard time saying it as well. So there you have it. Before we get to our serious questions, can you tell us something that maybe we don't know about you?
Well, in 2021, I inherited an ice cream shop. And so my mother-in-law passed away and my father-in-law was looking at selling it. And my family, it really meant a lot to them. And so I said, well, okay, I will figure out how to run an ice cream shop. So have added that to my repertoire as well. And thankfully, things are going really well with that. It's a real blessing. I hire quite a few of our local high school students. And so I get to kind of support them and mentor them and encourage them as they're working through high school as well.
Wow, that's actually really cool. And, thank you for sharing that. So now to the more serious matters at hand, obviously, schools seem to be the very front line of the culture wars these days. As a school board member, how do you navigate this?
To the best of your ability is really the only thing that I can say. It's definitely been challenging times. I do my best to take in all of the information and do my research and make the best choices I possibly can, realizing that in these times, it is more and more difficult to make everyone happy. Yeah,
understood. We're all horrified these days by what seems to be the annual school shooting somewhere. You've been on the board, obviously, for a while. Is there something else that can be done, or is there something that you'd like to see happen to ensure that the children are safe?
Yeah, here in Brevard County, we were actually kind of ahead of the ball on school security. Long before Marjorie Stoneman Douglas, we were already doing a lot of work to ensure that our schools could be as safe as they could. I actually went through, in Brevard County here, we have what's called the School Safety Specialist Program. And so what we've done is we have hired prior law enforcement and prior military individuals, put them through 176 hours of training with Brevard County Sheriff's Department. And they then serve as additional protection at our schools in the event of an incident. I actually had the opportunity to complete that training so that I could better understand the intensity of the training and the quality of the individuals that we were turning out. And that's a fairly innovative approach to school security. That's in addition to all of our schools having a school resource officer. If there's something that I would say that would help us to be more safe or secure, it would be additional mental health supports for our students. It's really difficult to access pediatric mental health support. And I think that's a critical area where we could identify these challenges earlier and provide assistance to these students that would potentially make some bad choices.
Should our teachers be armed?
You know, we had that conversation here in Brevard County, and our community was not in favor of arming teachers, which is why we went with the school safety specialist program. And I've talked with a lot of teachers who say, I do not want to have a gun. And I will tell you, having gone through the training, I was not comfortable with guns when I started. I did have a concealed carry permit, but there is no way that I would have been comfortable having a gun on me in a classroom and being in a situation where I needed to defend my students with a weapon at that point in time. So, I think we have to take into account all that teachers have on their plates. And I don't think they went into education because they wanted to be toting guns for the majority of them. At least that was the feedback that we received.
Gotcha. Thank you. You touch on mental health. Obviously, these last 2 years for all of us has been just hell, right? And for our kids, I have students in Brevard Public Schools as well. I have children, in Brevard Public Schools, who have suffered these last few years. You mentioned it a little bit earlier. Besides more, counselors, what else can be done to try to get our students, our kids, the mental health help they need?
Really what we need are more providers. We have put together a resource document for our families that might be in need of mental health support, along with other resources in our community. But the reality is that pediatric mental health providers are few and far between. And so what we really need is more people going into that profession, especially here in our community.
Gotcha. Now, just looking back a little bit, you got a lot of, pushback from Tallahassee as the school board chair for instituting a mask mandate because of the surge in cases at the beginning of the school year. Looking back now, hindsight always being 2020, do you stand by that decision? Would you do anything differently?
I stand by it. I think I made the best decision that I could at the time. We certainly saw our cases start to decline and go in the right direction in our schools after that. Maybe today, if I had additional information, I may have made a different decision. But at the time, something had to be done. We were on the verge. We had already closed one school. We were on the verge of closing 2 to 3 others. We had several staff members in the hospital, several students in the hospital. 2 of our staff members that were in the hospital were actually pregnant mothers. Things were spiraling out of control. And so I felt like something had to be done. And I made the best decision I could at that point in time.
How hard is it to make an unpopular, or it seemed unpopular anyway, a decision like that when you have, people yelling at you or, outside with signs or whatever?
Yeah, I always fall back on number one, I do my research, I listen to all sides, and I try to find a win-win whenever I can. The reality is in that situation, there was no win-win, and there was no majority in our community in reality. There were many, many people who wanted masks in schools, and there were many, many people who did not want masks in schools. And there wasn't really an in-between where we could address the issue and meet everyone's needs. And so I think, as an elected official, you have to have thick skin. You have to be able to live with the choices that you make. And that really is my guiding principle, if you will, is at the end of the day, I have to be able to lay my head on the pillow and know in my heart that I did the best that I could for our students.
Gotcha. Thank you. There's been a lot of talk in recent years about teacher salaries, the need to raise them in order to retain and attract the educators that we want here in our schools for our kids. How important is this issue, and what can be done to raise pay if you're in favor of that?
Sure. So it is an absolutely critical issue, and pay is one of the big things that is prompting teachers to leave the profession. Discipline is another issue, and we can talk about that a little bit more later. But pay is a significant issue, and a couple of things happened at the state level this year that are really impacting that. So the state mandated that the minimum teacher salary be raised in all districts and provided some funding to do that. They also provided some funding for teachers who were making over the minimum salary, but not enough to really make a difference. And then the other challenge that we face is there is language in statute that says once we meet the minimum teacher salary of $47,500, which we will this year. For every dollar that we give to a teacher making above the minimum teacher salary, we must give 50 cents to those making the minimum teacher salary. So that minimum keeps increasing, and we can't really have significant impact on creating a spread between new teachers and veteran teachers, which is a real challenge. The other issue, as you know, business is booming in Brevard County. We've got so much going on with the space industry. And so it's a very competitive market. And a lot of our teachers can go and make a lot more money elsewhere with, quite frankly, a lot less stress. And then the last thing that I'll say on that is many of our surrounding counties already have a millage to provide additional funding for teacher salaries. So it's very easy, as you know, here in Brevard County, the way that we are geographically situated, for our teachers to run over to Orange County, Seminole County, Volusia County, Indian River County, and get jobs where they can make more money, which creates a real issue. So we have to do something about teacher salary in Brevard County if we're going to keep Brevard's best here in Brevard. We love our new teachers that are coming out energized and with great ideas, but the reality is we know that teachers don't really get to their maximum impact until they've been in the classroom for a bit of time. 3 to 5 years is when they really kind of find their groove and start really having significant impact on students. And so we want to keep those veteran teachers, and we want them to know that we appreciate them and we value their experience. And one of the ways that we can do that is by increasing teacher pay. That's one of the reasons that the board approved to put a millage on the ballot in November.
And so knowing how you feel on this issue and also knowing what constraints you have, what is it like dealing with the union, our Federation of Teachers, when you're negotiating, with them? And is there something that can be done to like streamline the process or, make it easier for everybody?
I would love to say there is. Negotiations are always tenuous. Thankfully, I am not at the bargaining table. In fact, board members are advised in our ethics training that we should not be at the bargaining table. There's a bargaining team for the district and a bargaining team for the union. And so they work through those issues. We've been at the table several times already this year. And we've already approved some premium pay for teachers that were with us this year and stick with us next year, and some sign-on bonuses for teachers who come on next year to try to address those vacancies. But we have not yet gotten to the point of a settlement on the rest of the issues.
Gotcha. Okay. Now the very popular topic of, books and, book banning or removing books, for like certain ages. I have heard all types of stories from all types of people. Some people call books pornographic, and so what is your take on all this, and how would you handle this increase or this like seeming increase in requests for book reviews and possible bans?
So as you may know, the board went through pretty significant policy change this year with regard to book reviews in response to the increased requests for book reviews. Initially, we had a process set up in the district where if there was a book that was being questioned, there would be a committee formed at the school where the book was. And that committee would evaluate the book, determine if it meets statutory requirements for materials in our schools, and make a determination. We have now gone to, based on the increased request for book review, we modified our policy to provide an opportunity for a committee at the district level. So instead of having to convene a committee at every single school where that book might have been questioned, if there is a challenge to the book in multiple schools, then we can convene a district level committee that will review the book and make recommendation. So we are hopeful that we can get those books reviewed and get determinations made, and then I'm sure there probably will be more as we come, but hopefully we've got a solid process in place now.
Gotcha. Perfect. Some new laws went into effect July 1st. How would you advise teachers who find themselves trying to navigate some of these new rules for talking to students? And I'm not talking about class lessons or what they're teaching, but perhaps students that seek out trusted teachers about sensitive topics, whether race, inequality, or gender, sexuality, etc. What do you tell teachers?
That's a really tough one, John, because the legislation has been passed, and we are hoping for more direction from the state. Oftentimes, what we get is a technical paper on the legislation when it's passed to give us some more clarity on how that legislation is being interpreted at the state level. We will definitely have to be having some conversations with our teachers to provide them with as much information as we can, because we don't want them, our teachers obviously never enter a situation with the intent of doing anything wrong. But we want to give them as much information as we can so that they are comfortable with what they can and cannot do or say in those situations. All of our campuses have guidance counselors and social workers. So oftentimes those are a good resource if a child comes to a teacher and there's a topic that the teacher doesn't feel comfortable discussing. They certainly could make a recommendation that the student reach out to the guidance counselor or the social worker. And we're just going to have to navigate it the best way that we can.
Are there any topics that should be off limits in schools entirely, do you think?
That's really difficult to control. So, for example, I was talking this morning with someone about the legislation that prohibits discussion of sexual orientation and gender identity. Clearly, this isn't something that's part of our curriculum in the schools. It never has been. It's never going to be, especially in the kindergarten through third grade level. However, picture a scenario where a second grade class convenes on Monday morning, and in circle time, the teacher says, "Tell me the best thing that you did this weekend." And one of the students says, "My mom's took me to Disney." And another student says, "Your mom's, why do you have two moms?" Now the teacher is in a situation where there's clearly a discussion about sexual orientation and gender identity taking place. And so they're going to have to figure out how they can navigate that in this situation. The bigger concern, though, is if another student in that class goes home and tells their parents that this conversation took place, the parents obviously don't have the full context of the conversation and get upset and file a complaint against the teacher. So we're really going to have to work hard to navigate. I've had teachers who are in same-sex marriages ask, "Does that mean I can't have family pictures in my classroom?" So we're digging through the legislative language and trying to work with the state to get as much guidance as possible so that we can assist our teachers in navigating it as well.
Do you anticipate a lot of early complaints from people who are just looking to, raise the issue, do you think? Or
I do. I think, one of the challenges is there's not necessarily shared definition on things. And so another example I give is, I have had people tell me that you absolutely are teaching critical race theory in Brevard County because you have pictures of Black children in your textbooks. And so I think, not having a shared definition of what actually constitutes teaching critical race theory is problematic. And I think we'll run into that same problem with some of the other statutory language that's coming down this year.
so that just brings me to my next question, about parental involvement. I'm sure that for many years, I feel like, like schools and school boards have wanted more involvement from parents. A lot more seem to be getting involved. How do you think Brevard Public Schools is doing in terms of that right now, and the influence that maybe some parents have, and is there something that you would draw the line at, or is it encouraged?
We absolutely are encouraging parent involvement. Obviously, during the height of the pandemic, we didn't have parents in schools, and that was necessary with all of the contact tracing and trying to minimize infection and that sort of thing. But we have lifted all of those restrictions, and we are absolutely encouraging parents to be in schools and be involved. We have covered the cost of fingerprinting so that parents can get their background check done to be able to be in the school. We're doing mobile fingerprinting so that parents can access that fingerprinting easier. We have recently put together a new mentoring structure that will allow schools to get mentoring programs up and running in their school. And so we're encouraging parents and community members to sign up for that and get involved so that we can meet the needs of our students to the best of our ability. We realize that we can't do it alone, and we need parents to come alongside us.
Great. We all want our elected officials to be really good listeners as well, right? So can you think of a time, an example perhaps, when you changed your mind about something after learning more about it or after hearing somebody else's side on it?
Oh, I'm sure there are lots of instances. I try really hard not to make a decision or choose a path necessarily until I have listened to all sides of the issue and done the research. I guess one that comes to mind is very early on after I was elected, there was discussion about putting in a liquid natural gas plant. And I was being kind of pulled into the conversation because it was going to be within, I think, 2 miles of one of our schools or 1 mile of one of our schools or something like that. And the initial calls that I was getting were, this can't happen. It's going to, cause cancer in our kids and all of these things. And so I started reaching out to people on both sides of the issue and trying to listen to all of the perspectives and doing my own independent research. In the end, it came out that there wasn't going to be impact to the school. But certainly initially, from that feedback that I was getting initially, it seemed as though it might be problematic. So, there are so many things that we deal with as school board members that I never thought that we would have to be involved with. But you have to be willing to listen to all of the input and then do your research and make the best decision you can.
Gotcha. And like speaking of policy and changing your mind or anything, is there one policy change that you've made during your tenure on the school board that you're most proud of?
So the word policy in and of itself, I don't, we have changed. For example, we put in parental leave. So if a family adopts or has a child, we've added parental leave, and we're one of the only districts in the state that currently provide parental leave when a family has a child, paid parental leave. So that's one that I'm pretty excited about. We've had lots of things that have happened in my 8 years on the board that are not necessarily like written in policy that I think have been very good things. Our Thrive by 5 program that we started to connect with families early. So every mother that gives birth in a hospital in Brevard County receives a bag from us that includes the book Brown Bear, Brown Bear, along with some resources for them to access online, and they can sign up to receive a book every year. So programmatic type things that we have done, I think there are a lot of those, along with expansion of career and technical education programs. Very excited to have been able to bring a welding program into Astronaut High School and cybersecurity into Titusville High School. The NASA Hunch program and the Teaching Academy at Space Coast, as well as their STEM program that they have down there, which is an integration of courses. So lots of programmatic things, not necessarily actual written policy changes that I think have been super exciting.
Right, gotcha. Earlier this, like a school year also, I think there was quite a hubbub about, public, comments at school board meetings. Could you tell us exactly what happened, and do you stand by what, rule changes were implemented?
Yeah, I'll be happy to share. So we did have we had several school board meetings that got a little heated. And things seemed to be escalating meeting after meeting. And so on that particular meeting, before I even got into the boardroom, I was made aware that there had already been an altercation between individuals in the boardroom, and that the temperature in the room was pretty hot. And so when we started the meeting, we had taken all of the public comments, and we were getting to the point of board discussion, and there was some discussion among board members that resulted in a lot of interaction from the audience, basically interrupting the discussion of the board. And so I had tried to rein it in, continued to escalate. And so I actually, on that date, cleared the boardroom. And, it comes down to, we absolutely want to hear from as many parents as possible, but we need it to be appropriate. The feedback that we're receiving be delivered appropriately. And we need to make sure that we can maintain a safe environment in the boardroom. And so a couple of things that we did in response to that, we gave some more clear expectations as far as decorum in the boardroom. We are a limited public forum, so we are not only allowed, but encouraged to have those expectations for decorum so that we can continue the work of the board. The other thing that we did policy-wise with regard to public comment is we changed the time structure. Initially, speakers had 3 minutes to speak, and it didn't matter how many speakers we had or whether they were speaking on an agenda topic or if they were speaking on something that was not on our agenda. And we changed that policy. So now people actually get 2 opportunities to speak. They can speak to an agenda item and they can speak to a non-agenda item. Depending on the number of speakers that we have, we scale that down. So if we have over 10 speakers, then we scale it down from 3 minutes per person to 2 minutes per person. And over 20 speakers, then we would scale it down to 1 minute per person. But that is for the agenda item topics as well as the non-agenda. So feasibly, someone could have 6 minutes of public comment now if there's less than 10 speakers, in addition to being able to speak on any of the public hearing items.
Gotcha. Thank you. I had wanted to ask you, in an unusual move, our governor, Ron DeSantis, has decided to endorse school board members. He endorsed your opponent. What was your reaction to that?
I wasn't surprised. The governor certainly was not happy with the decision to require masks in schools. And so I anticipated that was probably coming. But, there's another piece of that I think a lot of people are unaware of. And that is that my understanding is the governor's endorsement also comes with a requirement to commit to uphold the governor's agenda. And I just cannot commit to uphold any individual's agenda. I commit to uphold the agenda of our community by listening and doing my best to represent everyone in the community. And so I think that requirement is somewhat problematic. Would he have endorsed her anyway? Most likely because of the mask situation. But I just couldn't make that commitment.
Great. Thank you, Misty. We have about 1 minute here left. Can you tell us what the biggest issue is that you are facing and why we should vote for you?
Sure. The biggest issue we're facing in the district is really retention and recruitment of employees. And there are several factors to that. Obviously, the wage compression issue that we talked about earlier, the discipline issues that we're facing in schools, so we have to address those. And then a third area that I really am focusing on is expansion of opportunities in our career and technical education programs to ensure that all of our students can access as many programs as possible to meet the needs and their interests. And with regard to why people should vote for me, I have been on the board for 8 years now. I think most people would tell you that I have been the voice of reason, the calm in the storm many times. Certainly my experience is significant, having spent those 8 years on the board, the ability to understand the budget and what's going on with that, knowledge about the education laws in Florida and what we can and cannot do. My obvious involvement very heavily in our schools on a regular basis, volunteering, serving. A lot of people say that the school board is a part-time job, but I can tell you in my 8 years, it certainly has not been part-time. I am fully invested and look forward to continuing to serve.
Great. Well, thank you so much for your time. We have incumbent candidate for School Board District 1, Misty Belford. Once again, thank you on behalf of Florida Today and our friends over at Eastern Florida State College. We'd like to thank you for watching and good luck.
Thanks, John. I appreciate it.